everybody. It's Denise. I have a really amazing guest with me, Richard Killion, who has come up with these really cool cards, which I told you guys about a little bit about maybe a month ago or something, that I was going to have him on. And we're just going to have a conversation about him and how we know each other and how the cards came about and what they kind of do for you, because they're interesting. I do use them sometimes when I'm talking to people, just to kind of, especially if I'm dealing with something psychological, I'll kind of just, boundaries. Okay, that makes sense for this person.
Right.
Yeah, because he sent them to me like shortly after he published them. So that was very cool of him. Thank you for doing that.
Well, thanks for having me on the show today. I really appreciate it. It's great.
It's great to see you. Yeah.
Yeah. So in the interest of full disclosure, I have used Denise in the past with astrology charts, with some psychic reading. And well, she's the greatest. What can I say? I mean, I've used her any number of times. I really always enjoy talking to you, Denise. Always.
Same. And also, he is a licensed clinical social worker. So he's coming from making these cards as a social worker, as someone who works with people all the time. He actually developed these cards by talking with people and kind of pearls of wisdom that would kind of come out in conversations and in therapy sessions. That's kind of where this genesis of this was, right?
Yeah, it was really interesting. This basically occurred kind of over COVID.
Right.
So my background as a social worker is primarily in the workplace. So I work in a lot of programs called employee assistance programs, right?
Right.
And so that means there's a counselor usually on site in the workplace, and I see employees. And right now I'm at a big tech firm in New York City. I've been there for about 6 years. And well, I used to go in there, 3 times a week. And then when COVID hit, I wasn't there at all.
Wow.
And I shift everything from, on-site to virtual, which was really odd as a therapist, because when you're doing something like that virtually, you don't always, you miss something. I'm doing on-site again now, and I can tell you, I appreciate it so much more now.
Right.
Because when I'm online with people, I catch some of the energy, I catch some of the, the nuances, but it's so much easier when you're in person with somebody.
That makes sense.
The body language, all of it, right?
Sure.
So anyway, I was sort of stuck like everybody else in their bedroom working. And so, I'm known as the tie-dye therapist. So this is how this came about. It was crazy. So, like everybody else, I tried to find the most comfortable thing I could wear every time I went to work.
Right.
And I have this whole collection of tie-dye shirts. And I'm figuring nobody cares really what I wear, right?
Right.
But one particular client did. And one day I found this old plaid shirt, and I'm wearing it, and she comes online and she says, "Plaid, ugh." And I go, what? And she said, I just really prefer you in tie-dye, and I'm kind of hoping you could wear it like when we're meeting.
That's so crazy.
And a lot of therapists would say, oh, boundary issue, or what are you doing with that? Right. And I didn't even think of it. I just said, okay, just a second. And I went to my closet. I pulled out 2 or 3 shirts that were tie-dye. And I said, okay, your choice today. What would you like me to wear? And I'm not going to dress in front of you, but, you pick one. Oh, I like the blue and the purple. Oh, great. Let me put it on. And so it kind of became this joke, right? Like, if you're going to see me in tie-dye. And then I thought about the whole concept of tie-dye, which actually had kind of a renaissance during COVID.
Right. Oh, interesting. Oh, because people were bored. Making tie. That makes sense.
People were bored. They were making tie-dye. They were wearing a lot of tie-dye because it's comforting. It's like this retro thing where people remember.
Yes. The 70s. And when we were kids. Yes. Right.
And it makes you feel good. I mean, my kids, I have 2 small kids. They love it when I wear tie-dye because it's colorful and it's not the norm and it's a crazy pattern and you don't know, right?
Yeah.
And it's just kind of fun. And then I thought, well, that's a great thing to do. And then the way these cards came about was same client. And she came online one day and she said, you ought to write a book about all of your Richardisms. You know, you call them pearls of wisdom, but this lady was calling them Richardisms. And I said, well, what are you talking about? And she said, well, you know, you say the same thing to me many times about my problems. And I think you ought to write a book about all the things that you tell people. And I thought, flattering, but have no intention of writing a book. So I said, well, you know, thanks for the support, but no, I don't think I'll be writing a book. And I thought that would end it, right? 10 minutes later, we're still in conversation. She comes back and she says, well, you know, if you won't write a book, the very least you could do is make cards.
Wow.
And I said, what are you referring to now? And she said, I'm referring to the Richardism. She says, you like the tarot, you like oracle cards. I know you've told me this. There's no reason why you couldn't make a deck of cards with all of your Richardisms. I was astounded when I heard this from this person, I have to tell you, right?
It's a cool idea. It's a really
cool idea, but I was such a skeptic, you know, when I heard it. And I thought I got to shut this down. And I looked at her, I said, you know, you're so sweet to think of this, but I don't have nearly enough material for such a project like that. And she said, oh, but you do have the material, because I have compiled a spreadsheet of all of the things you've told me in 4 years.
Oh my gosh, that's crazy.
And I thought to myself, you absolutely work in tech, because
that's amazing.
Right? That's somebody in tech who did that.
That's wild.
So I just gave up. I just said, well, send me the spreadsheet. So she did. And I looked it over in the next couple of days. And I thought, I cannot believe I said half of this stuff to this woman. Some of this stuff, I didn't know if I was on medication that day. I mean, it was like, this is cuckoo stuff. And then I read some of the other things and I thought, wow, that's pretty good. So then it just sort of inspired me. And so the next year, while we were finishing up COVID, I was learning about how to create a deck, you know, because it had self-published. And, you know, I had a friend who was a graphic artist, and she agreed to jump on board with this project. And we tapped into this brand, the Tie-Dyed Therapist. And we, you know, so the cards on the other side, there's the tie-dye.
There's tie-dye. Yep, right here.
Right. And then I split it up into 4 suits, you know, and I started writing little bits for each of the cards, which then became a little booklet that went into the deck. Right. And then I had to learn about, you know, trademarks and publishing and
it's a lot.
ISBN numbers and and it just took off. And so this past January, around the 21st, I had a launch party.
Oh, that's cool.
And it was great. And I got some press, and I set up an e-commerce site, and I set up a connection to Amazon.
Right. And you have a website, right? What's your website? Is it called the Tie-Dye? It's called
www.tiedyedtherapist.com.
I'll put a thing at the end with so people can look at it, and I'll put it in the description below too.
Right. Thank you.
So you can text it to me so people can see it.
But you know, since I've launched it, you know, I'm finding that my intention on these things has changed a lot over time. So I first thought it would be a mindfulness tool. I thought that somebody would have their own deck, and every day they would just pull a card, and it would give them a bit of wisdom, because there's 52 of them, you know. And it's just kind of grown from there. I mean, I have people that use them for journaling exercises.
Oh, that's a good idea. I like that.
I did I did a past, present, future spread on my channel
Interesting.
the other
That's
day.
cool. Oh yeah, you have to put tell me your channel and I'll put a link to that too. Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
So, you know, that was kind of cool, because what I'm really finding is that the booklet that I wrote wasn't really needed.
No, it's not. It's not needed. The thing I think is really interesting about them. So for me, we talked a little bit before we came on about the difference between kind of like psychotherapy and psychology are kind of cousins to psychic and astrology.
Yes.
Psychicism and there's roots. Jung was really fascinated with that stuff, and a lot of ideas come out of mysticism that started as that and then moved through science from, and you guys behavioral watching people and doing a lot of research into the way people's minds work. There's a lot of correlation between those two things. So and in fact, in full disclosure, I do have a lot of therapists and psychologists who come to me. So you're not the only one. So there is there are a lot of therapists and psychologists who are fascinated by this stuff, because there is this weird thing where there's a crossover between both of those things, where where I start, so I can maybe kind of come up and tell people what's going on in their life and give them perspective. But for you guys are in the mud with people, helping them to change their behaviors and shift their lives and kind of emotionally heal them. So you guys are like emotional healers, I would say. That's kind of your job, as kind of an emotional healer. Don't you think so?
Yeah, I would say so. And to sort of add on to your part, it's like, it's something that you've taught me about the astrology that you do, is that, yes, you can see patterns, you can see progressions, you can see placements of things, right? But I know you've said this on your channel before, people always have free will.
That's right, they do.
So in other words, everything can be spelled out in an astrological chart that, it's going to go down in a certain way. But people always have the ability to make change.
That's right.
People always have the ability to choose another option.
That's correct.
And that's, it's like when I have clients that come and see me, sometimes they get very curious about psychic stuff. And they ask me kind of sheepishly, "Oh, what do you think of psychics? Have you ever used a psychic?" And I'm like, "Oh yeah, I've used many psychics in my life." And I always try to caution them about this, not that I distrust psychic information, but I tell them that psychics pull information from a number of different sources.
Right.
And sometimes they're 100% accurate, sometimes they're off. Human beings, they're not perfect.
That's correct.
And so it's about really like using your own intuition, using what resonates for you, and also not becoming dependent on a psychic.
That's right. That's exactly right.
So it's like when I use a psychic mostly for, just sort of to tell
confirmation.
Me, confirmation. Exactly. That's the word. It's like, I was like probably about 6 to 8 months into this project with the cards. And then I thought, I should really check in with Denise about this. Because honestly, when I started working on this project, I did think it was crazy. I didn't understand like how this was going to turn out. I still don't, to tell you the truth.
Right. Well, nobody ever knows for sure, but
it's not one of those business models that, you could predict, right? Like,
absolutely.
Makes cards and has a YouTube channel. It's just right. Talk about unconventional. But at the same time, I needed just a little bit of confirmation to keep going.
Right.
And that's something that you gave me. You gave me the encouragement, you gave me the confirmation to like say, hey, keep working on this. Don't give it up. It's a good idea.
I think it's really cool. In some ways, I don't know if you've ever seen some of these other types of cards that are sort of not exactly like yours, because yours are unique, but there's like the thing that came out in like the 80s and the 90s called the Creative Whack Pack. And then there's another thing called the Observation Deck, which was another thing for writers to kind of get little prompts and stuff like that. To me, this reminds me of some of those things a little bit, but it's different. It's more like personal and psychological. And you can use them, in terms of it as an oracle as well. I mean, like I said, if I'm talking to someone and they're in need of some kind of psychological kind of, advice, you know what I mean, about how to handle a situation. Sometimes I'll pull one of these and just see it. And it always works out, because oracles are like that. Spirit uses whatever.
Yes.
And so, you know what I'm saying? They work for that purpose too.
Yeah, I was in a group the other day. I'm learning to do these workshops with these cards.
Right.
And actually, there was a group of people I was working with, and there's a card in there that says, "My tears are valuable."
Oh, wow.
And the lady who pulled that card at random,
wow.
She lost her husband about a year ago to COVID.
Oh, wow.
She was in massive grief. I mean, she'd been grieving this loss now on her second year, and she got this card, and it just it hit her like a ton of bricks, right?
Right. Wow.
Because we started talking about how valuable it is to cry, how necessary it is, not only from an emotional standpoint, but just physiologically, right? It helps your hormones and all this stuff. It's a cleansing thing that has to happen. And when people don't have the ability to cry, they're bottling it up. It's really hard on the body.
Right.
But I'm just always amazed at how these cards,
how incredibly how spirit works through them. Right.
Yeah.
It works through them. That's the wild thing about I think people don't really think about that, but everything is an oracle, really. Do you know what I'm saying? Everything is kind of, if you're paying attention, everything is a sign in a way. And I mean,
but you have to pay attention.
You have to pay attention. If you're paying attention, you'll see reflections of things kind of either, giving you insight, and things that kind of catch your attention. You pay attention to that stuff, and it's reflect on it. It's talking to you. So, I mean, in this way, you've taken all these different ideas and different, pearls of wisdom that have come up through therapeutic setting and put them into these different categories. And it's interesting. I was wondering about the suits, like what made you do the different suits and what do they represent? And, are they different, like psychological states or something like that, the suit colors? Or
no, that's a good question.
Yeah.
Let's explain what the four suits are. So the first suit is called therapeutic, and they're purple cards, and they have a little brain on them, I think.
Yeah, here they are. Yep.
Right. So those are the kinds of Richardisms that I would use to talk to people about cognitive behavioral concepts, or psychodynamic things about distorted thinking, or how your thoughts really change mood and emotion, and things that you should be doing just for yourself therapeutically.
Right.
But then see, over the years, and I've done this for over 20 years now, I talk to people about everything. I talk to them about their spirituality. I talk to them about their health. I talk to them about their therapy, common sense stuff. So the second suit is called spiritual/holistic. And it's about concepts that people can take care of themselves in those ways. So like one of my cards is about sleep and how sleep is important, and tears. And there's one card that's called Don't Block the Blessings.
Oh, wow.
And that actually comes from the title of a Patti LaBelle book.
Oh, wow. That's great.
Years ago, she wrote this book, and then she did this interview, and I never forgot listening to her. I mean, first of all, I love her as a singer.
Right.
But she did this title, Don't Block the Blessings. And what that really means is that when you have really good things happening in your life, don't sabotage yourself.
Right. That makes sense.
Right?
Yes,
People get some good stuff going in, and then they say, oh, when's the shoe going to drop? Right?
And they freak out. Yeah.
When are things going to go bad? And inevitably they do, because you helped create that scenario. Not that it always just happens magically and it's all so wonderful, but I think we can block our blessings a little
I
bit.
agree.
Right?
We can definitely sabotage ourselves for sure.
So those are the yellow cards, and there's 13 of those, and then there's this they're sort of teal blue, and they're called common sense cards, and these are just things that I would
red flags
like I would just pop up with about different things that I think people. It's not. I wouldn't call it therapeutic. I would just say these are like common sense things, you know.
Right.
Like boundaries, right? And red flags. When do red flags happen? Well, red flags are patterns of behavior. When you see stuff happening, what does that tell you, right? Likely it's going to happen again. It's going to repeat.
Right.
So, and then the last group are the red ones, and they're questions. And I didn't write any descriptions for those because they're kind of self-evident, you know.
Right.
What is my intent? Am I willing to change my mind? Things like that, where like if you ask yourself these questions at the right time, talk about spirit again,
right?
It can change your path.
Right. Definitely. Right? Yeah, sure.
That's how I ended up with 2 kids. I ended up with 2 kids by asking myself, am I willing to change my mind?
Right.
My husband wanted kids. I was like, oh, I don't know. I'm 50 something years old. I don't think so. And one day that question popped into my head. Are you willing to change your mind about this?
And it was a great thing to do, wasn't it? Turned out to be great.
It was a fantastic thing to do, right?
Right.
But it set everything in motion, because the minute I heard, yes, I am willing to change my mind about that, it meant that the door was open.
That's right.
Now, I also tell people, like, if you use that card, am I willing to change my mind, and you get a no, you have to respect that too.
Right. That's true.
Right? So sometimes, we know for certain we shouldn't do something.
That's right. But that's a good question to ask yourself, though, isn't it? To know whether you are willing to or whether you're not. Whether it really is part of your value system or whether it's just an idea you have.
That's right.
About yourself. Yeah.
And if you're really not wanting to change your mind, then please don't. Because there's a reason for that.
Sure.
Right. So that's pretty much how the suits work. And
that's cool.
So, but you're right. There's so many products now out on the market. They're psychological tools, just like these cards, and they have people sort of explore what their thinking is or their feelings are about something. And what I like about cards as opposed to books, people are more apt to pick up a card than they are a book.
That's right. Well, it's also more interactive though too, Richard. I mean, you can use these cards like oracle cards. For example, if you were kind of like in a funky mood and you really don't know why you're feeling kind of depressed or why you're down, you could kind of look at the cards and then like I pulled just now, I think of that the reframe. So maybe you're not, it's kind of makes you think about it. Like maybe I'm not framing things in a way in my mind, like I'm not appreciating my life. I'm not being thankful or having gratitude right now. And that's why I'm bummed out. You know what I'm saying? So you can kind of use it like in so many different ways for yourself and for other people too, to kind of, so I think it's really, I think it's really helpful in a way. I think it's more helpful in some ways than than a psychology book is for a lot of people, because that reading it and like a self-help book, you go through it and you read it and you take it in, but it kind of ebbs and flows and you kind of throw it away sometimes after you're done.
Yes.
But this is something you kind of work with over time. You can work with it. It's like kind of like giving yourself a little bit of therapy every day. So I think it's really cool.
Well, I think the difference is that with a self-help book, you're reading what somebody else tells you to do, or they tell you this is the way it is, this is the theory, this is why it works, this is why you should do this, right? Those cards, when you don't use the booklet and you just interpret them yourself and use your own intuition and your own gut feeling, then you decide what it is. You interpret that card in a different way.
That's right.
I was talking to somebody who actually takes these cards, and every Sunday morning, it's the only time he gets to spend with his wife. he sits over coffee with his wife and they pull cards
Oh, wow.
and they tell each other what that card means to them.
That's a cool idea.
And I thought, wow, that's really kind of sweet, right? That you would
Right.
do that. So they make for great conversation starters as well.
That makes sense. Yeah, that's very cool. Yeah, there's so many ways you can use them, and that's kind of the thing there's, I mean, that's why you don't really need, they're not the kind of cards that you're going to like, I mean, you could do a spread. I mean, you could put one, where am I at right now? Where am I going to be in the future?
Right.
And it would work, but it's, to me, like, I think they really work. I would think that, I mean, and I use them in this way when I'm reading for people sometimes. If I'm like, somebody's really, because this is to me the difference between a psychic and an astrologer and being a therapist is, well, I do listen to a lot of people's problems and I try to help them and make them feel better. My job is really to kind of give people perspective about the big picture and the patterns in their life. And sometimes you run into people who are having a lot of psychological stuff that's,
Right.
it's really a psychological block or hurdle that's kind of creating the problem or pattern in their life. It's not, it always is that, right? I mean, really, ultimately. But sometimes people can kind of they can have enough perspective to kind of get over it on their own. And sometimes they need help from somebody like you know what I mean? Somebody who can get in there and really help them to kind of rethink things and reframe things and, expel all the old injuries and kind of like really get in the weeds with them. And sometimes these cards can really be helpful in giving somebody a piece of advice about what next step to take too. You know what I mean? Or where they're at. Yeah,
I hope it works out for that.
It does. It does.
I'm fascinated to watch how this thing
evolves. Yeah, right. Yeah. So. I mean, I think it's got a lot of different uses is the thing that's really cool about them. And I think even if you're going through a hard time yourself, it seems like they'd be really valuable for you personally, just because like you could just use them and meditate on what's going on, pull a card, maybe like you said, write a journal entry and you know what I mean? And kind of sort of expel and do the therapy with yourself, kind of like you're kind of having like a little mini therapist in these cards, something to play off of and something to kind of, it's not therapy, but it is a way of kind of reflecting on yourself and kind of psychologically, it's really helpful, I think.
Well, what you're saying is really tapping into something that I say to clients all the time is that, you and I can spend an hour in therapy a week or every other week. But then it's all this other time that you're by yourself. What are you doing?
That's right. That's right.
It's not that you're going to get the big fix with me. You're going to get the fix over time because you're starting to work on you. You're starting to catch yourself when you're having distorted thoughts. You're going to catch yourself when you're really setting yourself up for another disaster, mentally. Right. So, hopefully, when people come and see me or they use these cards, it starts to help them throughout the week instead of just one day.
Right. That's really, that makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense. And so they're a support. They're kind of like a support system in a way for therapy. Yeah. Right. The way that you design them. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And I've had people come in who've had the cards and they've said, oh yeah, I pulled this card up, and then they tell me what they thought about it or what it meant to them. And they make some sort of association with it. That's the other thing that these cards do, which is kind of funny, is like they tap into a past memory. They tap into a past situation, a history, right?
Right.
And like you were talking about this card called the reframe.
Right.
The reframe is it's a cognitive behavioral therapy concept about reframing some of the things that you say to yourself.
Right.
And seeing what that reframe does in terms of a change, right? Does it lessen your anxiety? Does it lessen your depression? Does it make you look at something in a different way? Does it give you an option that you didn't have before? So when people are tapping into these cards or whatever they're doing, they're also tapping into their narrative. They're tapping into their history.
Right.
And that's how it grows. That's how it becomes.
So in that's also kind of because they're sentences and they're kind of ideas and they're bigger ideas. It seems like you said, they can also shift and change how you interpret them for yourself. Like
that's right.
The space you're in when you're utilizing them. That's kind of what you're talking about, right? Yeah, that's that makes a lot of sense. I mean, I really think they're really cool. And I mean, I don't know what else to say about them except for they are really, I think, very helpful. And I think people will. I mean, I'm kind of a fanatic about cards. I can't even tell you how many cards I have. It's crazy.
I have a ton too. Yeah.
I love them. I just think they're so, I mean, for this very reason, because cards they're interactive and they're self-reflective. And this is just another tool that's slightly different than a lot of the oracle cards and stuff like that. Or tarot cards, which are often more about external things. This is really asking you to look at yourself when you get these cards, in some ways. They remind me a little bit of, in a different way, but of like there was a deck of cards called, I think they're called the Animal. They're Native American based.
They're like deck. Animal totem cards or something.
Yeah, like that, because those totem cards kind of represent psychological or spiritual or powers or things like that. And in some ways, they make you think about who you are and why you're the way that you are. These are more direct and more pointed and kind of more to the point and much more laser kind of focused on different aspects, which is really helpful. Yeah.
Well, I have to credit all the tarot decks that I've seen over the years.
Right.
That's how I really got started into this stuff, was because I really did get attracted to the tarot,
right?
Because of the messages, because of the symbolism, right?
Yes.
I mean, father, mother, child. I mean, all this archetypal stuff, right?
Yeah.
See, I think that for some of us who are much more visual, or anybody who's artistic for sure and creative, it's like this. To have this symbolism, to have this vision, to have something outside yourself to see.
Yeah.
It really does sort of add a whole different dimension into your perspective.
It really does.
Right?
Totally. Yeah, definitely. It takes it out of the nebulous Neptunian sort of kind of thinking, feeling, into something that you can physically look at, which feels so much more concrete. You know what I mean? And it makes you feel like you're in conversation with that idea rather than it being in your head floating around. This is just my imagination kind of thing, Right.
And I mean, if I understand the history of these cards better, or if I understand it correctly, these tarot cards were used in medieval times, mostly because the bulk of the population didn't know how to read.
That's right.
So they saw an image.
Right.
They got a story, right?
That's right.
They knew what that card represented. They were getting all kinds of information from these cards. And it was really sort of a way that people communicated,
right.
Bigger ideas, bigger thoughts, bigger perspectives.
Right.
And isn't that interesting, right? Like, human beings will get information however we do it, even if we don't have the ability to read. Right.
That's right. It's true. Yeah. That's right. Well, Richard, I want you to be able to say your website again too. What's your say your website again?
So it's the website is called www.tiedyedtherapist.com. It's an e-commerce site.
Okay.
If you tap into Amazon and you want to buy them through Amazon, you can do that too. It's you would look under Tie-Dyed Therapist Wisdom Cards.
Okay, good to know.
And then I do a lot of shorts and some very brief videos on my YouTube channel, and that's called Tie-Dyed Therapist, the Tie-Dyed Therapist. Or you can just tap in Richard Killion and you'll pull me up.
Okay, good.
And I've been doing a channel now since Christmas.
Right, so it's not Still
it's
new.
just starting to get moving, you know.
Right. That's good. So I'll put a link on for all of those things in the description below. I'll put your website. I can put an Amazon link, and I'll put the link to your show, to your channel as well, so that people can find you more easily. Because I think people will really like this, and I think it's a really cool tool that you developed, and it's really unique. There's nothing like it. I've never seen anything like it, so it's very cool. I really like it. And thanks for being on today. Absolutely. And I would love to have you come back and talk more about it, whatever things you want to talk about, because it's really good to see you. And
I mean,
a lot of wisdom.
You know, the nice thing about the channel actually is that, you know, I do a little segment on, I call it Wisdom Card Wednesday, but the other times that I'm on, I'm doing interviews, or I'm doing, you know, topics. Like I did a whole topic on the adoption triad in the last 3 weeks, you know, from different perspectives. I did one on, you know, birth parents. I did one on adopted children, and one on, you know, adoptive parents and adopted. Right.
Well, that's interesting. So what did you discuss on your channel about those different, just the different kind of roles that people are in those situations, or different feelings that come up? Or
I talked about the different struggles that each of these groups represent.
I see.
And ironically, what I discovered when I was doing it was that I fit into each of these roles.
Wow.
So I was adopted, and then I became an adoptive parent, and then I became a birth parent.
Wow.
And that's crazy. So, I mean, it's amazing. It's kind of come full circle. And I talk a little bit about finding my birth mother. I talk about, you know, some of the labeling that happens with adoptees, and how that's, you know, really damaging at times. I talk about the struggles that birth parents go through, you know, birth mothers giving up their children. I talk about all the hurdles that adoptive parents have to go through to even raise a child. So stuff like that.
That sounds great. I mean, I know a lot of people actually, you know, from doing astrology and all the stuff and talking to people, as like you do all the time, different people. There's a lot of psychological things that come up about adoption, of especially with the kids feeling like they don't fit in and feeling abandoned, stuff like that. Yeah, it's a pretty common theme that runs through, and it's really hard for the people who are the parents too, because you know, if you adopt the child and you love them, and it's like they don't really trust that part of them. Do you know what I mean? So that
they always think that their child is going to go find their birth parent, then run off. You know,
right.
That's the biggest fear, right? I gave this child all this love, and then they're gonna leave me.
Or also just that their child doesn't even accept them totally as their real parents. You know what I'm saying? Like they're kind of they'll say sometimes even things to the parents like, you're not, you know, like, I don't fit in here, or I don't belong here. You're not my real family. Things like that.
Yes. And you're not my mom. Right.
You're not my real mom, or you're not my real dad. I mean, I think those kind of things happen in situations like that. And it's not always, obviously, but it does happen. It's pretty tough. It can be tough depending on this, you know, a lot of things that happen before you adopt that kid. If the kid is in the system, they often will have a lot of trauma before you even get them, and then that's a whole other ball of wax, you know.
They have a lot of things they have to unlearn, because they've either been in a foster family or many of them for too long, in an orphanage, or, you know, something where they just really didn't get what they needed. So
that's right. So that's a whole thing. I mean, that's a whole thing to deal with. But yeah, I mean, I am so glad you came on, Richard, and I hope you had a good time. I'm going to let it, we'll say goodbye to everyone, and then I'll talk to you a little bit and say goodbye to you later. But everyone, thank you for watching, and check out Richard's channel. Check out his book. I mean, not his book, but his cards. Check out his cards. Go on Amazon. His book is in the cards, but and check out you know, all the things he's doing on his channel, because it sounds like he's doing a lot of really cool things that are going to be very helpful for a lot of people. Thanks, Richard, for being on.
Thanks, Denise. I appreciate it.
Right.
Okay.